If you ask most Americans how long it takes for 100,000 to become 1 million, the answers come fast. And they're almost always wrong. Some say 10 years, some say 15, some say it depends on the market. But here's the brutal truth. Most people don't want to hear. For the majority of investors, $100 never becomes 1 million at all. Not because they didn't work hard, not because they didn't save, but because they misunderstood time. See, Wall Street loves to talk about returns. 6%, 8%, 10%. Nice, clean numbers that sound reassuring. What they don't talk about is how long you must endure boredom, doubt, fear, and temptation for those numbers to actually matter. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. If I told you that even at a solid 8% return, it takes over 30 years for $100 to quietly turn into $1 million, would you still feel confident about your retirement timeline? Because that's where the math leads. And the math doesn't care about your optimism. This is the part no one shows you on a chart. The decades where nothing seems to happen. The years where your account grows slowly enough to feel pointless, yet dangerously fast enough to make mistakes catastrophic. Most people quit during this phase. They chase something faster. They get clever. They try to outsmart time. And that's exactly when compounding breaks. Charlie Munger once said that the big money is not in the buying or the selling, but in the waiting. What he didn't say out loud is that waiting is psychologically brutal, because waiting means watching others get rich quicker. Waiting means staying invested during crashes. Waiting means resisting the urge to do something when doing nothing is the smartest move. In the next few minutes, I'm not going to hype you up with shortcuts. I'm not going to promise you freedom by next decade. Instead, I'm going to show you the exact timelines, the real math, and the hidden traps that determine whether 100,000 ever becomes 1 million or quietly dies along the way. And by the end of this video, you'll know something most investors never fully accept. Building wealth isn't hard, because the math is complex. It's hard because time tells the truth about who you really are. To understand why this conversation matters so much right now, we need to anchor it to someone who actually lived through multiple market cycles, not just talked about them. Charlie Munger didn't build wealth by chasing trends. He built it by surviving long enough for compounding to work. Born in 1924, Munger lived through the Great Depression, World War II, stagflation in the 1970s, the dot-com bubble, the financial crisis of 2008, and the chaos of modern markets. He saw what really happens to people who think they understand investing, and what happens to those who actually do. And here's what makes his perspective painfully relevant today. Americans between 35 and 65 are more anxious about money than at any point in recent history. Retirement feels closer, but less certain. Pensions are gone. Social Security feels shaky. Inflation quietly eats purchasing power. And market headlines swing between euphoria and panic every few months. Many people in this age group did the right things. They saved. They contributed to a 401k. They avoided obvious disasters. Yet a haunting question lingers in the background. Is it enough? That's where the 100,000 milestone becomes emotionally loaded. For many Americans, 100K isn't just a number. It represents discipline, years of restraint, proof that they're not irresponsible. And somewhere along the way, an assumption sneaks in, usually unspoken. If I've reached 100,000, the hard part is over. Charlie Munger would strongly disagree. He repeatedly warned that the most dangerous phase of investing is after early success, when people confuse progress with inevitability, because this is the moment when expectations detach from reality. People hear phrases like the market averages 10%. They extrapolate. They imagine straight lines instead of messy decades. What they fail to see is that time is not evenly distributed in compounding. The first 10 to 15 years feel slow, almost insulting. The last 10 years do most of the heavy lifting. But here's the cruel twist. Most financial stress happens before compounding becomes powerful. Medical costs, college tuition, career instability, market crashes that arrive right when confidence is highest. This is why so many portfolios stall between 200K and 400K and never recover their momentum. Munger's core warning was simple but uncomfortable. You don't need brilliance to succeed in investing, but you do need emotional endurance. And endurance is exactly what modern investors are trained not to have. Apps refresh every second. Media amplifies fear. Everyone else's success is constantly visible. So when we ask, how long does it really take for 100,000 to become 1 million? We're not asking a math question. We're asking a behavioral question, a psychological one, a life planning one. And unless you understand the foundation beneath that number, the timeline will always betray you. If there is one foundational principle that determines whether 100,000 ever becomes 1 million. It is not intelligence. It is not stock picking. It is not even discipline in the way most people define it. The foundation is this: compound interest only works if you give it uninterrupted time and protect it from stupidity. Charlie Munger was brutally clear about this. He often said that investing success comes more from avoiding big mistakes than from making brilliant moves. In his words, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. Most people nod when they hear that. Very few actually live it. Let's slow this down and look at the math, because the numbers reveal why patience is not optional. Take a clean, boring example. You start with 100,000. You earn a realistic, long-term return of 8%. You do absolutely nothing fancy. No additions, no withdrawals. After 10 years, your 100,000 becomes roughly 216,000. That's it. Not life-changing. Not exciting. Certainly not what social media promised. After 20 years, that same 100,000 grows to about 400,000. This is the danger zone. At this point, many investors feel disappointed. 2 decades of waiting, and they're still not halfway to 1 million. This is where people abandon the plan. They switch strategies. They chase higher returns. They take risks they don't understand. But here's what they don't see. Between years 20 and 30, compounding finally shows its teeth. At year 30, that same 100,000 quietly crosses $1.06,000. No magic, no brilliance, just time doing what time does. This is why Munger emphasized patience with almost religious intensity. He understood that compounding is backloaded. The rewards come late, and only to those still standing. Now let's break the most common misunderstanding. Many people believe compounding is fragile because markets are volatile. In reality, compounding is fragile because human behavior is volatile. A single major mistake can destroy decades of progress. Selling during a panic, leveraging at the wrong time, chasing returns after a hot streak, abandoning a sound plan because it feels boring. Munger called these stupidity risks, and he believed they mattered far more than market risk. Let's look at a simple comparison. Investor A earns a steady 8% for 30 years without interruption. Investor B earns a higher average return, say 10%, but panics twice and misses 2 major recovery years. Investor A ends up wealthier. Why? Because time in the market beats theoretical returns that exist only on paper. This is the part most charts hide. They assume perfect behavior, perfect patience, Perfect emotional control. Real life is not perfect. And that's why Munger structured his philosophy around simplicity. Few decisions, high conviction, long holding periods. He wasn't trying to be smart every year. He was trying to be not stupid for 40 years. Another misconception is that patience means passivity. It doesn't. Patience means choosing a strategy that allows you to stay invested through boredom and fear. It means building a portfolio you can emotionally tolerate during crashes, because a strategy you can't stick with is a bad strategy, no matter how good it looks on paper. This is why the journey from 100,000 to 1 million feels unfair. The early years demand the most discipline and deliver the least visible reward. The later years deliver exponential growth, but only if you didn't sabotage the foundation. Munger understood this better than almost anyone. He waited decades for Berkshire Hathaway's results to look extraordinary. And when they did, outsiders called it genius. He called it time. The foundation of wealth is not acceleration, it is survival plus patience. And once you truly grasp that, the timeline stops feeling mysterious and starts feeling inevitable. Understanding the foundation is one thing. Applying it in real life, through messy markets and real emotions, is where most investors fail. So let's move from principle to practice. If you're sitting on 100,000 today, the real question is not what return is possible. The real question is, what return can you realistically hold on to for decades without breaking your own rules? Let's work through a grounded, practical scenario. Assume a long-term annual return of 8%. Not heroic, not optimistic, just historically reasonable for a diversified equity portfolio over long periods. At 8%, your money doubles roughly every 9 years. But the path is not smooth. In the first 5 years, your portfolio will experience multiple drawdowns, 10% drops, 20% drops, maybe worse. On paper, this doesn't change the math. In reality, this is where behavior intervenes. Now let's apply this to a real-life timeline. Imagine a 45-year-old investor with 100 and invested for retirement at 65. Year 110, the portfolio grows from 100,000 to about 216,000. Along the way, there is at least one major bear market. Headlines scream. Friends pull out. The temptation to wait for clarity feels responsible. If this investor exits the market during a crash and waits just 1 year too long to re-enter, the long-term outcome changes dramatically. Missing a single strong recovery year can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Now fast forward. Year 11-20. The portfolio reaches roughly 466,000. This is when confidence returns, and it becomes dangerous. This is the phase where investors often make their worst decisions. They start asking, what if I could speed this up? What if I just tilt a little more aggressive? What if I borrow to invest? This is where leverage, concentrated bets, and speculation sneak in. And this is where compounding gets interrupted. Charlie Munger warned repeatedly that trying to get rich faster is the surest way to stay poor. He understood that accelerating returns usually increases the probability of ruin. Let's compare two paths. Path 1, steady 8%, no interruptions, no heroics. Path 2, aggressive strategy that averages higher returns, but includes 150% loss. To recover from a 50% loss, you need a 100% gain just to get back to even. Time is lost. Confidence is shattered. Most people never fully recover emotionally, even if the numbers eventually do. This is why application matters more than theory. A portfolio that earns 7-8% consistently and that you can stick with through bad years will almost always outperform a better portfolio that you abandon at the wrong time. Now let's address a common mistake that feels responsible but isn't. Many investors reduce risk dramatically as soon as their portfolio reaches a certain size, often moving heavily into cash or bonds too early. While risk management matters, premature safety can be just as damaging as excessive risk. If your money stops compounding meaningfully at 55, it doesn't matter how careful you are. You've shortened time, and time is the engine. Munger never confused caution with paralysis. He avoided stupidity, not growth. The practical application then becomes clear. Choose a return assumption you can emotionally survive, or build a portfolio simple enough to understand. Listen, accept volatility as the cost of admission. Avoid decisions that permanently interrupt compounding. And perhaps, most importantly, design your strategy around your future behavior, not your present confidence. Because the investor you are during a market crash is not the investor you imagine yourself to be during a calm market. The path from 100,000 to 1 million is not blocked by math. It's blocked by moments of weakness, moments you must plan for in advance. Those who do reach 7 figures rarely did anything extraordinary. They simply avoided the ordinary mistakes that destroy time. Once you understand the math of compounding and learn how to apply it without sabotaging yourself, there is still one more layer. One that separates adequate outcomes from exceptional ones. Charlie Munger called this layer worldly wisdom. It's not a trick. It's not a formula. It's a way of thinking that protects compounding from forces most people don't even see. The first advanced insight is this: returns matter less than staying power. Most investors obsess over maximizing annual returns. Munger obsessed over minimizing the probability of permanent loss. He understood that wealth is built not by making the best decision every year, but by making no disastrous decisions over decades. This is why he avoided complexity. Complex strategies create fragile systems. Fragile systems break under stress, and stress always arrives when it's least convenient. Munger famously avoided leverage. He avoided derivatives he didn't fully understand. He avoided environments where one mistake could erase years of discipline. This wasn't conservatism. It was risk asymmetry awareness. A 10% gain improves your life slightly. A 50% loss changes your life permanently. The second insight is counterintuitive. The biggest enemy of compounding is success. Too early. Early wins inflate confidence. They encourage overreach. They convince investors that their intelligence, not time, is responsible for progress. Munger saw this pattern repeatedly. Investors would experience a strong decade, conclude they had figured it out, and then increase risk right before the cycle turned. The market doesn't punish ignorance as harshly as it punishes arrogance. This is why Munger insisted on intellectual humility. He stayed within circles of competence, not because he lacked curiosity, but because he respected uncertainty. Another advanced principle is inversion, thinking backward. Instead of asking, "How do I get rich faster?" Munger asked, "What would guarantee failure?" The answers are obvious when framed this way. Excessive leverage. Emotional trading. Overconfidence after success, ignoring valuation, chasing what recently worked. Avoiding these behaviors doesn't make headlines, but it preserves time. Munger once said that he was successful not because he was brilliant, but because he was consistently less stupid than others. That statement contains more truth than most investing books. There's also a subtle but powerful insight about psychological independence. Most investors are influenced by what others are doing. Even if they deny it, they feel pressure to act when others act, to explain themselves, to justify patience. Munger rejected this entirely. He was comfortable looking wrong for long periods. He knew that compounding requires social discomfort. You will underperform during speculative booms. You will look outdated. You will feel isolated. And then, quietly, time will shift the outcome. The final advanced insight is about identity. Munger didn't see himself as someone trying to make money. He saw himself as a long-term owner of productive assets. That identity changes behavior. Owners don't panic. Owners don't trade noise. Owners think in decades. When you adopt this mindset, the timeline from $100,000 to 1 million stops feeling like a test of luck and starts feeling like a test of character. The market doesn't demand genius. It demands restraint. And restraint, over long enough time, becomes an unfair advantage. At this point, the ideas are clear. The philosophy makes sense. But philosophy alone doesn't compound money. Behavior does. So let's turn everything you've learned into concrete actions. Things you can actually do starting tomorrow. The first step is to define your personal compounding runway. Ask yourself 2 honest questions. How many years can this money realistically stay invested? And how much volatility can I emotionally tolerate without interfering? If your answer is less than 15 years, your strategy must prioritize survival over growth. If it's 20 years or more, time becomes your most powerful ally, but only if you don't interrupt it. The second step is to set a return expectation you can live with, not brag about. Many investors intellectually accept 7 to 8% returns, but emotionally expect more. That mismatch creates frustration, and frustration leads to bad decisions. Write down your assumed return. Treat it as a contract with yourself. This anchors expectations during inevitable slow periods. The third step is to simplify your portfolio until it becomes boring. Complexity feels sophisticated, but it increases the chance of mistakes. Munger believed that a handful of well-understood assets held for long periods beats constant optimization. If you can't explain your portfolio in 1 minute, you don't understand it well enough to hold it during a crisis. The fourth step is to pre-commit to inaction during chaos. This is critical. Decide in advance what you will not do during market crashes. You will not sell everything. You will not wait for certainty. You will not abandon your plan because headlines are loud. Write this down. When panic hits, thinking becomes unreliable. Preparation replaces willpower. Next, build friction into bad decisions. Make it harder to trade impulsively. Fewer logins, longer delays, clear rules. Munger understood that removing temptation is more effective than resisting it. Now, let's address the most common objection. But what if I need the money? Then your mistake wasn't investing. It was mislabeling the time horizon. Money needed within 5 years does not belong in volatile assets. Separate near-term needs from long-term compounding capital. This clarity reduces fear. But what if the market underperforms? Then your job is not to predict. It's to endure. Underperformance doesn't break compounding. Abandonment does. Finally, adopt one habit that Munger quietly practiced. Periodic inactivity. Not constant monitoring. Not daily analysis. Scheduled check-ins, once or twice a year. Wealth grows best when it's ignored. The path from 100,000 to 1 million is not heroic. It's procedural. Set the runway. Choose survivable returns. Simplify. Pre-commit. Remove temptation. Do these consistently, and time will do the rest. Step back for a moment and look at the full arc of what we've covered, because the real lesson here is bigger than turning 100,000 into 1 million. At its core, compounding is not a financial concept. It's a life concept. It rewards consistency over intensity, patience over urgency, restraint over cleverness. That's why so many intelligent, hardworking people never reach the outcome they mathematically should. The obstacle isn't information, it's alignment between expectations, behavior, and time. Charlie Munger understood this deeply. He saw wealth as a byproduct of correct living, not frantic optimization. He didn't rush, because he didn't need to prove anything to the market. He let decades do the heavy lifting. For Americans approaching midlife or retirement, this perspective is grounding. You don't need to win every year. You don't need to beat the market. You don't need to predict the next crisis. You need a strategy that allows you to sleep at night and stay invested through the seasons of life that inevitably test you. Because the goal isn't just a bigger account balance. The goal is financial safety without constant anxiety. The goal is options in your later years. The goal is freedom from panic decisions when time is no longer flexible. When you see the timeline clearly, something subtle shifts. 30 years no longer feels like a prison sentence. It feels like a partnership with time on your side. Munger once said that a lot of people are trying to get rich too fast because they're not really thinking about how they want to live. He believed that wealth should reduce stress, not amplify it. That's the deeper promise of compounding done right. It doesn't shout. It doesn't impress strangers. It quietly builds a margin of safety, financially and psychologically. And when you finally reach the point where the numbers look impressive, you'll realize something ironic. The piece mattered more than the million. If this video changed the way you think about time, patience, and wealth, even a little, then it's already doing its job. Because the most valuable shift in investing doesn't happen in your portfolio. It happens in your expectations. If you're someone who wants to build wealth without hype, without shortcuts, and without constant anxiety, then this channel is for you. We focus on clear thinking, long-term discipline, and lessons drawn from people like Charlie Munger. Ideas that actually survive real life. If you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe, not for daily noise, but for steady guidance you can come back to when markets get loud. If you want to go deeper, I recommend watching the next video on your screen. It breaks down what happens when investors try to speed up compounding and why that instinct quietly destroys returns over time. It connects directly to what we discussed today. Now I'd like to hear from you. At what age did you first reach or expect to reach your first 100,000? And knowing what you know now, would you change anything about how you invest today? Leave a comment. I read them, and they often shape future videos. Because building wealth isn't about being perfect. It's about learning faster and making fewer irreversible mistakes. Thanks for watching. And remember, time is either your greatest ally or your most honest teacher.